I did not understand what I had witnessed until 3 days after the session ended. That is the honest accounting of it. I was present for the entire thing. I have the seat assignment to prove it, and I still missed it as it happened. Most of us did. That is, I have come to believe, exactly what she intended. My name is Verith. I was, a junior attaché to the Tithani Compact's Observer Delegation at the Concord Sovereignty's Civilian Peace Conference. The Sovereignty ran those conferences the way it ran everything, with enormous ceremony and careful cruelty. The chamber at Voss Station was long and white, and filled with tiered seating for 31 recognized delegations. The lighting was warm enough to feel hospitable. It was not hospitable. The Sovereignty's architects had designed the room so that the chair of the senior council sat slightly higher than everyone else, always. A small detail. The kind of detail that accumulates over decades into an unspoken understanding about who decides things. The human delegation that cycle was 2 people. It had been 3, but the Sovereignty had quietly denied the third member's transit credentials a week before the session opened. The lead representative, Maren Selke, arrived without comment on the matter. She was perhaps 55 years of age by human reckoning, which places her somewhere in what their biographers call middle career. She wore a dark coat, no insignia I could identify, and carried a flat document case of the kind used for physical copies of treaty instruments, an old-fashioned thing in a room full of projected displays. I remember noticing it and thinking nothing of it. The session's first 3 days were ordinary: resolutions on transit corridors, a dispute over mineral extraction rights near the Delvari Belt, the usual language about non-interference. Selke spoke when addressed. She asked precise questions. She made no speeches. When another delegation's representative made a pointed remark about Earth's history of what he called unilateral resource claims, she looked at him for a moment and then wrote something on the document in front of her. She did not respond aloud. The other representative seemed to expect a reaction and, receiving none, stopped talking and moved on. On the 4th day, Chamber Director Ossian Thuval called the session to order and read what was listed on the agenda as a credentials review. This happens occasionally. Delegations are re-verified. Procedural housekeeping. It is not normally an event. Thuval was the Sovereignty's man entirely. He had been chair of these conferences for 11 years. He read the list of approved delegations in alphabetical order by member designation, and when he reached the Terran entry he paused, just slightly, the pause of a man arriving at a rehearsed moment, and said that, following a review of Earth's treaty standing under Section 7 of the Sovereignty's Conference Charter, the Terran observer status was suspended, pending a compliance hearing. Earth's delegation was requested to vacate the floor. The room adjusted itself. I felt it the way you feel a pressure change. Some delegations lean together. Some fix their attention on the human table with the particular quality of attention that conceals relief. Maren Selke did not stand. Thuval waited. He was not accustomed to waiting. He said again, more precisely, that the Terran delegation was requested to vacate the observer floor. She looked at him, not with anger, not with protest. She looked at him, the way you look at a clock when you are checking the time. Then she opened the document case, removed a single physical folder, and set it on the table in front of her. She did not open it. She placed both hands flat on the table, one on each side of the folder, and she did not move again. She did not speak. Thuval called a brief recess. The recess lasted 40 minutes. When the session resumed, Thuval informed the chamber that the credentials review had been concluded and that all delegations were confirmed in their standing status. He did not look at the human table when he said it. The session moved on to the afternoon agenda, as if the morning had not occurred. I watched Selke for the rest of that day. She participated in one further exchange, a technical clarification on cargo inspection protocols. Her voice was even. She did not appear to be waiting for anything. She appeared, as far as I could read it, to be simply doing the work. 3 days later, the ledger arrived. It came as a transmission to every delegate's registered channel simultaneously, at 0400 station time, when everyone was asleep. By the time the morning session was called, every delegation had read it. I had read it twice. The Tithani Compact's senior observer pulled me aside before we entered the chamber and said, very quietly, that we were to take no position on the contents until we had received instruction from the Compact's home council. I told her I understood. The ledger was the Concord Sovereignty's internal record of the civilian peace conference's last 11 years. Every vote, every side arrangement, every agreed exclusion, every payment made to delegations whose treaty positions had shifted conveniently. It was annotated. The annotations were in the Sovereignty's own administrative notation, not translated, not paraphrased, but the actual internal script of the conference secretariat. It covered, among other things, the legal basis on which the credentials review mechanism in Section 7 had been extended during a closed session 3 years prior, without notification to the affected parties. Earth was not the first delegation it had been used against. No human name appeared anywhere in the document's transmission record. The metadata was clean. The document simply existed, delivered from a routing node that the Sovereignty's technical staff later described, in their emergency briefing, as one that should not have had access to internal secretariat files and that they could not immediately account for. I watched Thuval enter the chamber that morning. He was a composed man by nature, which is one of the things that made him effective. He was not composed that morning. He sat in the high chair and looked at the chamber, and the chamber looked back at him. Selke was already in her seat. She had arrived, as she always arrived, before most of the other delegations. She had the document case with her. It was closed. Someone, I believe it was the delegate from the Kashari hegemony, though I have never confirmed it, said, in a voice low enough that it was clearly not intended for the record, but loud enough that 6 delegations heard it. She knew. She knew when Thuval called that recess. Thuval did not call the formal session to order for 11 minutes. He sat in the high chair and looked at the chamber. He looked at Selke. She had a stylus in her hand and was reviewing something on the document in front of her. She did not look up. The Sovereignty called for an emergency session of its full council the following week. I was not present for that session, but the summary that circulated through diplomatic channels afterward described it as, quote, unproductive on the central questions. The word that appeared most frequently in the secondary reports was not a legal term or a procedural one. The word was simply, how. I have thought about that word for a long time. How did the document reach 31 channels simultaneously from a node the Sovereignty could not account for? How had Selke known that the recess would resolve in her favor? How had she sat at that table for the remainder of the day without the slightest visible sign that anything had been decided? Because by that point, I am certain it had been decided, all of it, before Thuval finished reading the credentials list. The answer I have arrived at is not a comfortable one. The Sovereignty had spent 11 years building a conference structure designed to manage, delay, and periodically exclude the parties it found inconvenient. It had done this with great care and considered itself quite good at it. What it had not done, in those 11 years, was ask what those parties had been doing in the meantime. The ledger was not the weapon. The ledger was the receipt. The Concord Sovereignty did not call another formal session of the Civilian Peace Conference. The charter was formally suspended 8 months later, attributed to budgetary restructuring. Thuval retired. The high chair was removed when the chamber was refitted for a different use. Marin Selke left Voss Station the day after the emergency session was announced. I happened to be in the transit corridor when her delegation departed. She was carrying the same document case. I do not know what was in it when she left. I have wondered. I did not say anything to her. There was nothing to say that would not have been superfluous. She walked past, calm and unhurried, and boarded the transit connector without looking back. That is the whole of what I saw. I have reported it as accurately as I am able. I will note only that in 11 years of attending these conferences, I never once saw a delegation leave with more than it arrived with. The humans left with everything.